in terms of the threat of homegrown terrorists, whatever scale that may be, but something that Americans are very concerned about. A new president approaching that question. We have heard from one presidential candidate, one idea is to keep Muslims from coming into the country, this fear that their terrorists will come in with Syrian refugees or such. That's one approach of one candidate. But what would be your advice to a president, either in terms of how worried about this should you be? Are the existing systems in place sufficient? Are there new ones that need to be there? But what would you say to the president about that?
I think, look, in a political season, you're not going to hear what's true, which is we've really managed and contained this threat for the reasons we've already discussed. President Obama has sort of tried to make speeches to that effect. It doesn't seem to be persuading the American public. The American public is still very worried about this. But I think the measures that we have in place are quite robust. Banning all Muslim immigration, as Donald Trump has suggested, I think would be the whole point of this book is that it's Americans. I mean, they're not immigrants. I mean, the vast majority of people in these cases are as American as anybody else. Major Dadal Hassan was born in Virginia. You mentioned Farouk, the San Bernardino shooter who's born in Chicago. So, I mean, banning Muslim, and by the way, banning Muslim immigration would also turn the Muslim population against you, and they're the people who can be the most helpful. I mean, I mentioned Imam Majid, who's personally persuaded 5 American men not to join ISIS. You want those people on your side. You don't want them to be alienated. So, there've been some sort of bumper sticker solutions that don't make any sense. And what we're doing is basically, it's worked. I mean, if we had this conversation in 2002, and I predicted that only a few dozen, 45 Americans would be killed by jihadi terrorists in the United States in the decade and a half after 9/11, that would have seemed absurd and overly optimistic. But yet, that is the actual case. And each of these deaths are an individual tragedy, but they're not national catastrophes like 9/11 was. And so we've really, now, of course, history is going to surprise us. And something's going to happen that we're going to be deeply surprised by. And I don't know what that is. And it could be, I think there's a sort of Moore's law in biology now, where biotechnology, where you're going to see very quick advances in the democratization of the ability to perhaps make biological weapons. And somebody with an idiosyncratic set of beliefs, like the anthrax attacker and after 9/11, or somebody animated by some ideology that we may not even know about or conceive of yet, may deploy these kinds of weapons. So I think, in a sense, you asked the question about bin Laden. I mean, what bin Laden showed is that, a relatively small group, not allied to a state, can do a lot of damage. And I think the likelihood that will continue as a trend, I think, is quite high, because no state in its right mind is going to attack the United States in any conventional sense now.